For as public a medium as podcasting is, a lot of information about specific podcasts is private. But private doesn't necessarily mean secret. How different would podcasting be were we more forthcoming? Hello and welcome to another Podcast Pontifications with me, Evo Terra. On Monday's episode, you learned that PodInbox's voicemail for podcasters service is making all voicemails left for podcasters public. Now that seems, at least at first blush, a rather radical thing. And yeah, it is. Which is partly why I'm attracted to it. I mean, radical thinking and I go kind of hand in hand, right? But as you ponder the merits of how you personally feel about making feedback listeners give to your show public, which, by the way, already happens via reviews, I want you to think a little wider than that. I wonder what podcasting would look like if more currently private information were made public. Or better stated, how the podcast industry would change if there were more transparency. Let's take the obvious one first. Audience size. What would happen if the relative size of a podcast audience were made public? For all podcasts. I mean, podcasts just starting out who have single-digit listeners, you know, your mom. Podcasts made by mega celebrities that have audiences in the millions, possibly. And every podcast in between. Now that number, the size of the audience, as a matter of public record, is weird, right? If you were curious how big an audience a show attracts, you could just look, because it'd be right there on display. Radical, right? Well, not as much as you might think. I mean, you can already see the size of an audience for just about any person or brand's social media accounts, right? You can easily look to see how many followers a YouTube channel has. Anyone can see this. And by the way, the size of a podcast audience is already an open secret. Any podcast that has advertising representation publishes how many people they reach on a monthly basis. So there's no real reason we're keeping this information a secret, other than there isn't a good universal way to calculate and present the data. We're tracking downloads, people, what? Well, that and pride, obviously. But speaking of advertising, what if we rolled that in with other forms of monetization and play around with the idea of making public the total income and expenses of a show? Okay, that's a bit more controversial because now we're getting into someone's personal finance. But remember, this is just a thought exercise here. But also consider that publicly traded companies are required by law to publish their financial information. Now, ignoring the huge administrative burden that would place on podcasters for a moment, it's interesting to ponder how we'd do something similar in podcasting. I also want you to keep in mind that podcasters like John Lee Dumas and Pat Flynn and other podcasters either are or have been doing something like this for quite some time now, but for their own reasons. Now, this mythical world where I think all serious podcasters might do something similar, I think that would paint a much healthier view of reality around the profitability of podcasting. Now, there's one more idea I have on what's private today that we could make public in podcasting. We need to make public the credits for a podcast and a podcast episode. The credits as in who brought this show to you. Yes, of course, the host, much as I'm the host. And I recognize for a lot of indie one-person shows, the host might be the only person who is deserving of credit, and therefore that problem is already, solved. But on balance, it's probably not just the solo podcaster who deserves credit. In some cases, yes, but certainly not in all cases. We should be thinking about giving credit to whomever or wherever the theme music for a podcast episode was collected from. Even, in fact, if that music was fully licensed. We should be giving credit to whomever proofed your outline, possibly, or maybe someone used as a sounding board. Those people are integral to the way your podcast functions, so why not let them get some credit. And for podcast productions where a whole slew of people are involved, give all of them the credit. Now here's where this gets really, really cool. Because podcasting is digital, those credit mentions can stack up for each of the entities listed, showing just exactly how deeply interwoven and interconnected are the people who make podcasting. Not just the people with the microphone in their face like me, but everybody, and how connected we really are. Podchaser is doing this today, and there's a brand new tag in the podcast namespace recently finalized which also does this. We already have some working models to accommodate this. My hope is that, in the future, podcast hosting companies better integrate, either with Podchaser or using the podcast:person tag to get these credits more easily added at the time of episode creation, or at least episode publishing. But before you paint me as some weird anti-privacy loon, I assure you I am not. I am not saying everyone should dox themselves by posting their home addresses or social security numbers online. I know there are far, far too many terrible people who prey on others, and I am in no way suggesting that anyone drop their guard from any real threats. But with all deference to those with those issues, I think that some data points in podcasting could be done more in public, to the betterment of all podcasting. With that, I shall be back on Monday with yet another podcast, Pontifications. Cheers!